Thank you for tuning in to Rise Above TV, where we are empowering humanity and supporting unity. You're watching Real Talk, Real Men, the place where men gather to talk about topics they typically don't talk about. Together, these gentlemen will mindfully redefine masculinity.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Real Talk, Real Men, where we are mindfully redefining masculinity. I want to welcome our guests, Gylon Jackson, Kevin Prince, and Barry Selby, here to talk about honesty, integrity, what that means to them, and how they use it to set the ripple out in the world to help write the gentleman's code. How you doing, guys?
Doing good gravy.
Doing crazy. How does one do crazy, Kevin?
Oh, gravy.
Oh, gravy.
Yeah.
I know all about gravy.
The gravy
I love
train.
gravy. I love gravy. One of the things I'm always, I tell it to people that understand it already. It's like, is everything gravy? Are you gravy? They're like, yeah, I'm gravy. You're like, all right, cool.
Right.
Right on. So I'll go ahead and start here with honesty and integrity, because I feel like there's this invisible line with most men in what that means, not just as a man, of course, right? Because that's what the show's about, but what it means in relationship, not just with your loved one, your life partner, right? But with friends, family members, acquaintances, just strangers. And that's this idea that you have to put on for the world, and I get these lines that are drawn, like you have to, there's Gylon at work, and then there's Gylon with his friends, and Kevin Prince the boyfriend, and then there's Barry the doctor, and Barry the friend, and Barry the like, I get that. I get there's the roles that we play in life. You know what I mean? But I feel like a lot of people find ways to be those things, to put on those things, and the way that they find to do that sucks a lot of energy out of who they really are, and it creates this idea that they need to withdraw from everything, isolate themselves, and completely cut themselves off, right? Which I know in a way can be healthy, but when you think about what led them there, it's not healthy, because you're not being honest to yourself, you're not being honest to the people around you, and with enough time, that thing collapses, and you're left in this hole, like, oh, who am I don't know what to do, blah, 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 who, and you're left with this choice of either changing, which can often seem daunting, right, or going back to what feels comfortable, and so for me, I feel like honesty and integrity comes with you first. You know what I mean? And knowing how you can be all those things without feeling like you have to draw energy from the wrong part of yourselves and feel like sucked at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, the people that you're around should energize you. They should fulfill you. You should actually feel a little more driven, a little more awake after being around them, I feel. You know what I mean? And if they're not doing that for you, then you need to just honor that and be like, hey, if I am the company I keep, I do not want to be like you guys, and just find new company.
That's so funny that you bring that up because I'm reading this book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And the chapter that I just finished reading was how the downside of creating good habits. And it was breaking down as far as what you were talking about as far as identity, and it was saying that one solution is to avoid making any single aspect of your identity an overwhelming portion of who you are. In the words of investor Paul Graham, keep your identity small. The more you let a single belief define you, the less capable you are of adapting when life challenges you. If you tie everything up in being the point guard or the partner at the firm or whatever else, then the loss of that facet of your life will wreck you. And so it's so interesting because it's just all like, especially during this time, it's like you want to have the core aspects about yourself. And I feel like we're constantly, as men, as humans, just constantly redefining that and refining that, and it's nurturing more of those instead of those identities that change. You know, like those identities that change, you know, over time while you're developing your integrity, your honesty, and different things like that, because you get put based on your environment. Your integrity and your honesty may change due to the company you keep, you know, due to the fact that their beliefs may actually feel like they're being honest and they're being, you know, they're moving with integrity, you know, but it's it's finding who you personally are. And a lot of times when you dive into that, you're going to be more universally accepting, you know, to be able to see like, okay, well, maybe I need some more learning in what integrity is, because I have this feeling that what they're saying is detrimental to a bunch of people. What they're saying or doing is hurting a bunch of people. And I don't agree with that to my core, and being able to challenge those and stand up for that, you know, for a lot of the people who can't say, and then be that example. You know, sometimes your environment will not reflect who you are in your core, and it's up to you to set that example, you to set that tone. Sometimes we expect for the environment to put the fire, you know, under us to like do something, and a lot of times it's the reverse. A lot of times it's waiting for you to make those changes, and it starts reflecting what it is that you're doing.
Anybody else have anything to add to that? That was awesome. I totally agree. Yeah. There's times where you have to embrace the feeling of not belonging where you're at, you know, because you're not meant to belong to the space. You're meant to change it. You're meant to be the stone that gets thrown into the lake that causes the ripples that other people notice, and begin to question, like, oh, wait a minute. I wonder why or how or what motivates this person to do it that way when everybody around him, right, tells him otherwise. And not only that, but he did it without any hesitation. There was no thinking about it. There was no thinking it through. There was no wondering if there was a better way or if there was anything else he could do. It was like, no, this is what it is, and this is what I'm going to do. You know.
But we only see it in that moment, Justin.
Mhm.
Right? We don't see that. That's the story that we're telling ourselves
Oh
for
yeah,
what
yeah,
we
yeah.
saw, for the integrity that we want to find, or the honesty we want to find in that person. Right? If I'm sitting next to you and Janie walks out of the room and she says, "Hey, how do I look?" and your honesty is, "Oh, baby, you look great," and I'm like, "Yeah, but those heels don't match that dress," right? In
Yeah,
that moment, I'm like, "Yo, where did Justin's integrity go?" Right?
yeah, yeah.
He
Mm.
did this wonderful thing for this person over here, but he can't tell his partner that she's not looking the way that he thinks she should look, and that's that honesty, and that's that integrity. Now, not to take anything away from us, we all do that at certain times, but at what point do we look at somebody like, man, look at that integrity, and look how they wake up in the morning at 4 o'clock and they do this, they do that, but that's just what we see, either from what we've learned or from the story that we see. Look at Kobe Bryant, right? We could argue that early on in Kobe Bryant's career, wasn't very honest. He lacked integrity because of a rape allegation that he had, right? But you could not find somebody in the past 10 years to say anything bad about Kobe Bryant. Nothing. Now, the blessing and the curse was that he probably had daughters after that, and all he had was daughters, right? But that's that piece that we see. So when we talk about integrity and we talk about some of these things, it's very, very interesting. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think to your first point, you have to ask. You just have to have the space to ask yourself, what is that person being honest to? You know, what's the context in his world? I like to think of that whenever I look at anybody else, and whenever I people watch. For me, that's one of the big things. I don't just watch a person's mannerisms and try to guess the personality based on body language. I try to look at the body language, guess what it is, and then imagine what it's like in their world. Like I imagine, for me, life's it's a video game, you know, And I feel like everybody has their own version of that. Maybe it's not a video game, maybe it's more of a quest or something. You made something else, but I know I try to give everybody else that space. Like that's their life, and they're just as driven as I am for certain things in their own way for reasons that are probably the exact opposite of mine, reasons that I would not touch any subject at all. But I think a big part of it is, what is that person being honest to, and what are they holding integrity in?
So let me throw a couple of things on the table now.
Absolutely.
The core value, and I'll explain this in a moment how I mean this, the core thing through honesty and integrity is oneness. And I mean this from point of view that I remember years ago, I was in a workshop, they talked about how honesty is broken down in Latin to on est, right? To be one with what is. And honesty is a personal experience that we go through, and it transforms, it changes. My views about what I thought was true and my honesty about something was one view 20 years ago than it is today, because I've evolved and changed. So honesty changes, because what happens is that personal truth changes. We didn't talk about truth, but honesty and truth are not quite the same thing. We may get to that later on. But integrity is about being integrated into the oneness. It's about being whole in ourselves, so that we're loyal to the identity that we believe ourselves to be. Again, integrity is consistent, but the identity might shift as we grow and evolve. What our life is like now than it was a few years ago, a few weeks ago, a few days ago, maybe different than it is now. So there's a shift in that place. So the understanding that honesty and integrity are personal and keep us to ourselves is key. But the thing about it is that because honesty is personal, it doesn't necessarily mean honesty to somebody else. One of the biggest challenges is how do we interact with other people, staying in our honesty and integrity, and having them be okay with that if it doesn't match their values or their truth or their particular honesty. There's this dance we get into with other people.
Yeah, for sure. Curiosity. I don't know if that was rhetorical or not, but curiosity was my answer to that. It just, if you just keep an air of curiosity about it, I think that dance becomes more playful.
So Barry, are we saying that on the honesty and integrity are individualized completely?
Individualized to the individual, yes. Meaning that my honesty, well, let me play this a little bit. You should go in that one. We can all be honest to our own values, our own truth, what we see, and look through honest eyes. At the same time, though, our particular perception or particular views can differ. For example, as it was talked off camera about Democrats and Republicans, a Democrat can be honest to their views that don't match the views of a Republican, or a man's honesty different from a woman's honesty. Like you were saying earlier about how if you were sitting down with Justin and you saw and Jenny about seeing her look and how he would say one thing and you say something else. Well, you would say one thing about a situation, whereas a woman might say something totally different because she sees things differently. So honesty and integrity for me are very personal. So in the sense they are individual, yes. However, the common ground of that is there's no hidden agenda. So if we're all being honest, then we're all like, this is me, this is the way it is. And we can be okay with that because we can say, okay, now I see who you really are. So that way we can all be on the same page, even though our honesty is different. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess what it comes down to is just accepting the person at their word and who they are in the moment.
Hopefully, yes. Because that's the other part is you have to presume that they're being as honest as you are, which they may be not.
Yeah. Which I think is a good segue into the next part about it, about being honest with yourself. How do you know you're being honest? How do you honor that honesty and integrity so that you go to bed at night feeling good about how honest you were that day?
There was a point in time where I was just all like, I would do certain things and it would be what would I guess considered a failure or like a loss or something like that. And I would be like, as long as my intentions were pure, like boom, that's everything that I needed. But then I realized that the intention doesn't matter if the action doesn't match as well. And it's just all like what I started learning was, there's almost like I guess in a way I would use that phrase as a crutch to almost hide behind the responsibility of the task at hand. It's like my intention was to get this done. My intention was, not to hurt any feelings. My intention was, to do X, Y, and Z, but coming from that action, that's where that intention and honesty with yourself come into play. It's like, if you can have your intentions be pure and have all of the greatest intentions in the world, but then you have that point where you have to be honest with yourself. And are you taking the correct actions, or are you saying as far as the things to actually match that intention? And it kind of goes into this trinity of like intention, integrity, and, you know, honesty with yourself, you know, and just being at this point, like, I feel like when understanding and digging more into myself, I could be more honest with myself, because I'm discovering more things about myself. You know, like, I can't be honest with something that I don't know. When I find out that, okay, this is an actual thing because of the action of the intention of bettering myself, you know, like, I can then be more honest with myself.
Yeah, yeah.
But not necessarily more honest, but honest to a different place that you are now than you were before.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of that, Barry, for me in my life, has been unraveling and decoding and recoding the felt sense and how I'm used to responding to it. Because for me, a big part of honesty and integrity is honoring that felt sense in the right way, you know. And for a long time, a lot of the felt senses they would rush me to anger. You know, I'd start thinking very narrow and very quick. So I ran in small circles, right? And I worked myself up very quickly, and it usually didn't end up very well. Like, more times than not, it did not end well. Hardly ever. Never did it not. Slowly creeping my way to the truth, right? But I noticed that during the trend, now I'm in a better place, but it was during the transition where I was in this space of confusion where it was like, okay, cool. I thought I was honoring my felt senses. I thought I was being honest with myself by just expressing myself in these moments where I felt a certain way, right? My body, I felt fear or anxiety. I felt like I needed to express something, right? So I did it in the state that I was in, which was usually anger, right? / fear. And it didn't turn out well. I ended up hurting someone's feelings, or saying something I regretted, or breaking something, or doing something that I regretted, something I ended up having to apologize for later. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until, you know, making that mistake a few times that I was like, okay, cool. Look, so honesty goes beyond just feeling like you got to say something in the moment and then saying it. You know, it's like Kevin was saying, is like, it goes into the intention. Like, why are you trying to be honest? Like, if you said this, what are you being, what's the intention here? What are you being honest to? What's the energy behind it? What's all of that stuff, you know? And we think it's hard. That's the amazing thing to me. We think it's hard. It's like this big hurdle, this huge wall to climb, this, that, and the other thing. But if you just get a glimpse of the light, or even a slither of the understanding that makes you go, huh, right? The rest of it can be, you can honor it, dude. It's like this door that just swings open, and then all of a sudden it's like, you can make the choice, because now you know what's good, even though it's not a lot, because you have all these horrible experiences to compare it to, right? Or you can just do what you want to do, you know? And that's why sitting here having the conversation and really pointing everything out just goes to show how much we have done that. We've looked at everything and been like, okay, whoa, and we're choosing a different way, you know? So,
well, speaking about that honesty piece about relationships too, it's so much easier to be honest in all your relationships. And this is builds a house of cards out of lies. So being we don't tell the truth, it's hard to keep track of what you did. I mean, it's mental, it's overload. Yeah. So frankly, for us, if we're going to be lazy, be honest.
Yeah, I love it.
Let me get really real. So I went through some stuff where nobody knew that I had a second daughter for the past 10 years, up until recently, right? About 2 years ago, they found out. So my time frame's a little off, but for about 10 years, right? And did Justin freeze? Justin froze.
I think I'm back.
So guy, you're saying about your daughter.
Yeah, so nobody knew about it, right? And then I was in an abusive relationship around that same time, and nobody knew that was abusive, right? So I went into this thing, and maybe it's the man in me, or I don't like using depression and saying I was depressed. I like to explain what was going on. I was confused. I didn't want to tell my parents anything. I didn't want to be another African American with another baby mama. You know, it wasn't what I wanted to be. And so I took myself to a place where I was able to deal with it. And dealing with who I was and what I was doing, I wasn't dealing with me. And I was making stuff up. I had tickets. I had all kind of stuff. Like everything was just jacked up in my life. My mother would call me, "How you doing?" "I'm doing okay." It was always, "I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay." But all this time, I'm making up all this stuff in my head. It's not that bad that you haven't met your daughter. It's not that bad that your tickets aren't theirs, and then they just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed until I rear-ended somebody. No license, no, just horrible, horrible, right? Luckily, we got an attorney. Things are a lot better now, but I learned about honesty, right? And during this time, and I've shared this with Janie and I shared this with Justin, was Pep Squad podcasts, right? My podcast I was doing. And it came out of Positive Energy People. This was like a transition part for me because I'd always been positive, but I wasn't surrounding myself with extremely positive people. And I met somebody and she drank too much, blah, blah, blah. But she showed me how to love again, which was the weirdest thing in the world, right? This woman had a boyfriend and everything else, but I learned how to love again because I wanted to give her everything she had never had. But in turn, I realized that I hadn't been giving myself what I was giving her. And so at the same time, I'm spiraling up, I'm kind of spiraling down because I'm searching for something in this woman and trying to give her something that I need from her. And she can't give it to me, but the only person who can give it to me is myself. And I'm making up all these things in my head. And, you know, we can be a couple and we can hang out. And, you know, at some point I may have come across a bit psychotic, even though I'm not. But, you know, but I'm making up all these stories in my head. And then I hit a brick wall. And after I hit that brick wall and I finally had yell and screaming matches with my parents and started dealing with my inner child, right? And started dealing with who I was and realizing I hadn't been honest to myself. And I just moved into a new place. And I'm seeing some of that old Gylon from the past 10 years sitting over there. And I have to deal with that because even though I'm in a new place, I'm in a new thing, it's almost like it's pulling me back. And it's so interesting when we talk about honesty and we talk about integrity. I don't think I wasn't honest. I don't think I lacked integrity. I did a lot of cool things, but I don't think I was often honest to myself about the real predicament that I had gotten myself into. And unless we do those things, unless we're honest, and it always comes back to everything we say, unless we're that way with ourselves, whether it's self-love, whether it's honesty, whether it's being kind, where Justin also talks about emulating his father, right? And having that persona and having to deal with that. I always wanted to be something for my father. I wanted to be what he was, but I can never be who my father is because that's who he is. All I can do is be me. And so, you know, it's interesting. The second definition, integrity, noun, the state of being whole and undivided, which is so beautiful of a word because being whole and being undivided is self-love, is self-care, is being honest with ourselves, is being honest with our friends and our family. And really, if you know you do something and either you do it well or you do it bad, and you do it that way, just be honest. Like, shit, yeah, fuck it.
That's how I do it.
Bad, and this is who I am. But at least be honest with the person. But be honest with yourself about what you don't do good. A lot of men, oh yeah, and I hate paying bills. I don't know anybody that enjoys paying bills, right? I hate paying bills.
I enjoy knowing they're paid.
Right? Yeah. So if I'm dating somebody or something like that, she's like, well, listen, I'll cook, I'll clean, just pay the bills. Here's my check. Tell me how much money I need. Right? Now I'm a lot better now than I was before. But even that, you know, but that's something that I know about myself, right? And again, the state of being whole and undivided integrity, wow, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think that undividedness, especially when it comes to being honest with yourself, is like you're saying, it goes into really understanding all aspects of yourself. A lot of people, they try to say I'm gonna get rid of my shadow, and it's just like, no, your shadow is always like, that's always there, but you can, when you're undivided, it's being able to know how to control and use that for good, and to understand as far as the different aspects. Because when you're honest with yourself, that's one thing that I'm learning as well. It's just like, I read this article about this guy who escaped prison and had a whole nother life for like 40 years, new name and everything, but he's a fugitive and he ended up getting caught. And it's that prime example on how, if you're not honest with yourself, it doesn't matter what you build around you on that false foundation, it's going to crumble in your face. It may be 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years, 40 years, but with you not being honest with yourself on those particular things, because those are things that I have to constantly say to myself. It's just all like, yeah, I'm doing this and this, but I do need to make sure that this is taken care of before I move forward. I do have to be honest with myself and be like, yeah, I have the freedom to do this, but I have the responsibility to do this, and balancing out the freedom and responsibility aspect, and then being honest, because it's just all like a lot of for a while, and it's easy to stay stuck in that. Like I'll be 30 in January, and I see how people can be in patterns, because I've seen myself, I reflected on myself for the past 10 years, so I can look at that, but then I can also see other people and how easy it is to just stay in a loop for 10, 20 years of just like these constant patterns that don't actually push you forward, because of that lack of honesty with yourself, that lack of honesty that you are getting by and you actually don't feel like you're doing your best, but you're not being honest with yourself, because you're just all like, I got things, kind of moving, but you don't want to take that extra step.
And it's nothing, and it's not bad,
Yeah.
right? You're not doing your best, but you're not doing your worst. You're maintaining. I think that's probably the best thing that I could look at, that what I went through, because I was maintaining relationships, I was maintaining my weight, but I necessarily wasn't mentally healthy. I was just maintaining. I was going with the flow. I wasn't water. I wasn't the rock. It was just like I was something floating along, and when a bump hit, a bump hit. I didn't go after things, and I did, and it wasn't all the time. And I think that's going back to what Justin was saying at the very beginning. It's like it's where we see each other in that moment, right? When I first met you, Justin, and really got to know Janie, it was because I was looking. I was in that space, and now I'm in a completely different space now. I feel like it's completely different, but it's just I'm creating, right? I'm creating my future. I'm creating what I want. I'm envisioning those things, and I can feel them on a daily basis. And I know when I create something that hurts. I know that when I create a roadblock, but I understand that I'm creating that roadblock. And maybe I need to spend a day and a half in the bed listening to meditation music, listening to life-changing stuff, taking a shower, just doing one little thing, but being honest with myself about that, right?
That's the key. Being honest in the moment is what sets you free.
For sure.
Because you were saying, like, it's tempting to numb out, to suppress, to ignore, to avoid dealing with lots of stuff. The more we can be honest with ourselves, the more we can face those things, the more whole we become. So it really is about being integrated, that inspiration itself, so we can live more fully. And frankly, it's a lifelong journey. We're all doing different ways, and so I understand where you're coming from.
For sure. To that point, one of the things for me was one of the things that drives me, and one of the things that dictates a lot of the decisions I make and how I go about certain things, was how much I don't want to be like my biological father. And I know thinking about it that way creates a dirty goal, right? Because your mind has to create what you don't want it to have, or it can say, no, not this, right? And I know better now, but that was one of the driving forces in my mind. It was like, you don't want to be like this guy. Make sure you're doing more. Make sure you're doing what he didn't, and blah, 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 blah. And one of the roadblocks I ended up running into was submitting, quote unquote, right, to a woman and the way she saw things or the way she wanted to do things, especially in conflict when we were in a relationship. You know, I saw submission to a woman from the only example I had is not a very good thing. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm not gonna play that role in my life. Hell no. But when you realize that there's an honorable type of submission where there's some nobility, as opposed to what I saw growing up, and I was like, I'm not gonna play that role. I'm not gonna be that guy. But that kept me from having the relationship, the kind of relationship with the energy exchange and the love that I was looking for, you know. And it wasn't until I was able to be honest with myself and was like, look, this is what it is, babe. I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to submit to a woman, this, that, and the other thing, blah, blah, blah. Breakthrough, we learn and we grow. And I don't think any of that would have happened if I wasn't willing to be honest with myself and hold integrity in what I actually want to do and be and where I want my life to go and all these other things. I think a lot of people, when it comes down to identity and all of that stuff, they let the subconscious take over and they just start fighting everything and fall into what's comfortable. But we all know how that goes. I love everything everybody had to say. I had a lot of fun talking about honesty, integrity, honor, and what it means to the gentlemen that were here to share their thoughts on the topic and what it means to them. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Be sure to tune in next time to Real Talk, Real Men, where we are mindfully redefining masculinity.
Be sure to like and follow at Rise Above TV for more mindful content.